Good morning, afternoon, and evening all. This is Yorkie with episode 1 of my in-depth track guide classics version. It's just going to be a 4-part series where basically we take a look at the 4 tracks from the classic content in F1 2013, and we will be using the 2013 Mercedes for this, which means the apex speeds may be slightly different, but the majority of the braking points and obviously the actual apex points themselves are very similar. Braking points you may need to brake ever so slightly earlier in some cars depending on how good their brakes are, but it doesn't take too long to figure out, and obviously once you've got basic track knowledge down, it's a lot easier to find your own braking points and where you can really push and attack corners and all that sort of thing. So without further ado, we're going to take a look at the first track, which is Jerez. We're going to be following exactly the same video format as the in-depth track guide series. We'll be starting off with a breakdown, we'll then take a look at the hot laps in both the dry and the wet, and then the setup for those hot laps. So without any further ado, let's get on with it. So, like we did in Malaysia, you need to take a similar line to the final corner in Jerez here. You want to go a little bit deep and then you want to bring it back in tight to get a good exit. Straight line at exit, maximise the acceleration coming out the final corner across the start finish line. Of course, no DRS around this track, so it's only curves. A braking point is just after the guy in the red top on the left hand side of the track there. It's probably about 80 metres before the corner, but of course there's no brake marker boards, so it makes it very difficult. You have to use other reference points. You're going to be shifting down from 7th gear all the way down into 2nd. You want to keep to the left hand side of the track to try and open up this relatively difficult turn 1. As we turn in, you don't want to run the curb on the inside. Instead, you just want to try and get as close to it as possible. Use that little bit of camber and the weird dip mid-corner to your advantage to try and hook the car into the apex. Your apex speed should be about 85 miles per hour, which equates to 135 kilometers per hour. And on the exit, you want to be relatively patient with the accelerator. You just want to balance it. As soon as you come over that crest, you want to start bringing it in. Run the curve on the outside. Keep over to the left-hand side of the track as we come into turn 2. And just as we're passing underneath the bridge, we're going to be braking very, very hard from 4th gear all the way down into 1st. And it's quite a relatively short braking zone, so you really need to attack those brakes quite heavily, as you do need to get the car slowed down in for this 2nd corner. So keeping over to the left side of the track, shifting down the gears, relatively aggressive. You're actually going to be trail braking as we turn into the corner, and you want to be hooking up the apex on the curb just here on the inside. Your apex speed should be about 65 miles per hour, which equates to 105 kilometers per hour. And it's probably about a mid-corner apex that you want to be hooking up, not anything earlier or too late. But as we come out through the corner, you're going to run the curb ever so slightly, balancing the throttle, and then you want to start bringing the throttle back in as you get up into 2nd gear. As soon as you get into 3rd, you should be completely flat out. Coming out through turn 3, use about 30-40% of your curves as we come now into turn 4. It's a long, completely flat out left-hander. Turn 5 is pretty much flat out as well, as long as you hook up the right line, which is exactly what we're doing so here, so just follow something similar to this. Your apex speed should be about 165 miles per hour and 265 kilometers per hour. Of course, this corner is completely flat out, so you want to try and really maximize the time and also the speed coming through this turn. You want to run the car out to the left hand side of the track. We're going to be looking for a very, very short braking zone. There isn't really much reference as to where to braking into this, but it's more just basic on feel that I do here. We're going to be shifting from 7th gear down into 5th gear, just dropping 2 gears as we take this relatively short braking zone. You want to keep to the left hand side of the track to try and open up this corner. You want to try and carry as much speed through this corner as possible. You can use 4th gear to try and maximise some of the acceleration, but I remain in 5th throughout the duration of this corner here on this lap. Your apex speed should be about 125 miles per hour, 200 kilometers per hour. You want to run the curb on the inside. You want to let the car drift out to the left-hand side of the track, out onto the outside. Use the curb on the exit there. Bring the car back over immediately to the right-hand side to open up this little chicane here. We're going to be shifting from 5th gear down into 3rd gear. Your braking point starts where the curb starts on the right-hand side of the track, just there. You're only going to be dropping down 2 gears, but you want to try and sacrifice this first left-hander to open up the right-hander a little bit more. So doing exactly that, we're going to be taking a relatively late apex, turning in quite late. Your apex speed should be about 100 miles per hour, which equates to 160 kilometers per hour. You don't want to take the curb aggressively on the inside here, as it will unsettle the car and make it more difficult to hook up the following right-hander. So instead, we're just going to brush the curb, And as you come out through the bend, we need to watch the transition between turn 7 and 8. Coming into 8 now, hooking up nice and smoothly. You should have a good line coming through this right-hander now. Your apex speed should be about 110 miles per hour, which equates to 175 kilometers per hour. And you want to brush the curb on the inside. You should be balancing the throttle at this point, just trying to keep the car nice and stable, ready for the straight that follows after this bend. So coming out through the exit now, just brushing the curb on the inside, run over to the left-hand side of the track, and then we're going to keep it left. We're going to be looking for our braking point, which is at the start of the gravel on the left-hand side of the track there. You can see it kind of indents into the grass a little bit. That's our reference point for this braking zone. We're going to be shifting from 6th gear all the way down into 1st. It's probably about 70 meters before the corner, so we're going to be braking relatively hard, and we're going to turn the car in as we get into 1st gear, and we're looking to hook up a mid-corner apex. Your apex speed should be about 65 miles per hour, which equates to 105 kilometers per hour. You kind of just want to brush the curb on the inside. You don't want to take it too aggressively, as the curbs on Jerez are actually quite aggressive curbs. They can unsettle the car quite easily. So coming through the corner now, you should be balancing the throttle as you bring the car over to the left-hand side of the track. Unwind the wheel, run the curb ever so slightly on the outside. You should be full throttle from 3rd gear onwards as you're coming through this fast left-hander from turn 10. You would have used about 30% of your curves by this point as we now come into turn 11. A very, very short braking zone. It's basically you just tap the brake as you just downshift but 1 gear from 6th down into 5th. And again, it's a very fast flowing left-hander. You basically just want to try and carry as much speed as possible, so you don't want to scrub off too much before the corner. So keeping to the right-hand side of the track, we're going to shift down that 1 gear. We're going to throw the car in, and you're looking to run the curb on the inside here. Your apex speed should be about 145 miles per hour, which equates to 235 kilometers per hour. And you basically want to hold a nice smooth flowing line throughout the duration of this corner. So from here on onwards, we should be starting to bring the throttle back in. You should be balancing it at this point exactly. So bring the throttle in, we're going to let the car drift over to the right hand side of the track, almost brush the curb on the outside there. As you bring it immediately back left, ready for turn 12. Our braking point is at the start of the blue and white curbing on the left hand side of the track there. We're going to be shifting down from 6th gear down into 2nd gear, ready for this relatively tight double right-hander. They're about 90 degrees corners. So doing exactly that, keeping the car over to the left-hand side of the track, we're going to throw the car in, and we're looking to hook up the curb on the inside here. Your apex speed should be about 90 miles per hour, which equates to 145 kilometers per hour. You want to run the curb on the inside. You should be balancing the throttle at this point, or starting to balance it ever so slightly. And you don't want to go too aggressive on the accelerator through the exit as another right-hander follows. So coming out the corner, shift up a gear. You're going to shift up into 4th as we come into this right-hander now. And it's basically just a slight lift. It isn't flat out. You lift ever so slightly, so you should be probably about 30-40% of throttle. At this point, your apex speed should be about 110 miles per hour, which equates to 175 kilometers per hour. Again, you want to be running the curb on the inside here, and as you come out through the exit, balancing the throttle still, you're going to start bringing it back in, run the curb on the outside, try not to run over the curb though on the exit, as we come into this double right-hander, which is very, very fast, completely flat out. Just brush the curbs on both the inside and on the outside, like we do just there, hooking up beautifully as we bring the car over to the right-hand side for the final corner now. Our braking point is just before the fire truck on the right-hand side of the track there. And we're going to be shifting down from 7th gear down into 2nd. You can use 1st, 2nd helps with stability, 1st helps to get the car just hooked in that a little bit tighter and also give you a little bit more acceleration on the exit. But we're going to be following a relatively similar line, slightly earlier turning point, and you want to be hooking up a late apex where the curb starts on the inside here. Your apex speed should be about 65 miles per hour, which equates to 105 kilometers per hour. And I'm just using 2nd gear for stability here. I don't really need 1st, as the acceleration is pretty decent on this car coming out of this final corner. You need to watch the bump here on the exit, as it can unsettle the car and cause the rear wheels to spin. So you want to be starting to straighten the wheel as soon as you can. Get over to the right hand side of the track, drain the rest of the curves as you come across the start finish line to complete your lap of Jerez. So we're going to move on to the hot lap now, which is exactly the same lap as what I used for the breakdown, but I'm going to leave it completely unedited with the volume turned up so you can hear my throttle inputs and get a real sense of the speed. Okay, so now that you've seen the dry hot lap, we're going to move on to the wet hot lap now. It's pretty much exactly the same line that we take through the final corner as we did at the start, this time taking a much wider entry, trying to hook up that exit, use the curves on the exit as we come over the start finish line now, slowly bringing the car to the left hand side. Our braking point is about 5-10 metres earlier, using first gear this time ever so slightly, dropping it down into first, bringing it back up into second, getting a decent run through that first corner. Turn 2, getting a little bit of oversteer, ever so slightly, a little bit of rear spin, but didn't really need to correct it. Coming through these two flat out left-handers. Turn 5 again is completely flat out. Turn 6, dropping down into fourth gear this time, bringing the car back over to the right hand side of the track, hooking up this turn 7 and 8 very nicely indeed. Turn 9, braking point again, ever so slightly earlier, probably about 5-10 metres again, hooking up, be very patient on the throttle as it's very easy to spin those rear wheels in the wet. Getting a good run through turn 10 as we come into turn 11. Again, ever so slightly more patient on the throttle than I was in the dry. And coming into turn 12 now, missing the apex completely and having to sacrifice some of the speed on the exit, but hooking up turn 13 very nicely there. Turn 14 and 15 again completely flat out. Coming through here, just keep your foot in, just throw the car in and hope that it sticks. Coming into the final corner, again braking ever so slightly earlier, using first gear this time, watching the bump on the exit, being very patient on the throttle, running the curb on the outside and then draining the rest of the curves to complete the lap. So for the final part of the video, we're going to be taking a look at the setups that I use for these two hot laps. First, we're going to be starting off with the dry, and for our wings, we were using a 5.5 to try and maximise as much downforce as possible. We're going to be using a 4951 with a high standard braking setup. Balance is 7.7, ever so slightly off from the default. Suspension, ride height's 1.1, then a 7.8 for spring stiffness. Gear ratios are as follows. You don't really need to run long gears as there isn't really too big of straights in Jerez. And then there's the gear ratios in kilometers per hour. And then the toe and also the camber setup that I used. So now moving on to the wet hot lap, ever so slightly more front wing for the wet. Brake bias ever so slightly different, using a medium instead of a high brake pressure and slightly more towards the rear. Pretty much a standard roll bar setup on the balance. Your suspension, again the same ride height and ever so slightly softer rear spring stiffness. Those are the gear ratios that I used for the wet lap in miles per hour, then in kilometers per hour just there. And then finally the toe and camber settings that I used for the wet, very similar to the dry as well, but slightly more on the rear. So that's going to conclude this classic in-depth track guide video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Please give it a rating. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more track guides and F1 and probably other content as well that I'm hoping to bring up soon in the future. So hopefully see you soon, guys. Take care.